Coming to you from the dining room table at East Barbary Lane, we welcome you to a special episode of Full Circle, the podcast. I am your host, Charles Tyson Jr., and I'm sitting here alone because Martha Madrigal is busy working it. But no worries, she will be joining us as usual in our next episode. So this is a fun one for me. I recently got the chance to sit down and have a chat with the one and only Christopher Rice. For those of you that don't know, Christopher Rice is a fabulous author. His dearly departed mother was none other than Anne Rice, who wrote such classics as the Mayfair Witches series, Interview with the Vampire, and the Vampire Chronicles. Christopher and his mother collaborated on a few novels, and he and his mother are also the executive producers of the television series Interview with the Vampire and the Mayfair Witches, currently on AMC+. Christopher has written a bevy of novels himself that span so many different genres, from suspense to crime to supernatural thriller to erotic romance, and that last one is where we'll be focusing today. I spoke to Christopher about his most recent work, Sapphire Storm, which he's writing under the pseudonym C. Travis Rice. It is a gay erotic romance. Had me hooked right there. Sapphire Storm is book 3 in a series that center around a luxurious gay resort called Sapphire Cove. And the things that happen, let me tell you, the main characters in this story are Ethan and Roman. Ethan is a superstar chef who works at Sapphire Cove. He is the head pastry chef at Sapphire Cove. And Roman enters Ethan's life one day under false pretenses and with an ulterior motive. And that ulterior motive is none other than revenge. And, you know, their relationship changes, to say the least. And wackiness ensues, as it were. It's a fabulous read. I highly recommend it. And I got to sit and talk with Christopher about it. So without further ado, let's check out my conversation with the one and only Christopher Rice. Christopher Rice is in the house. How are you doing, sir?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm great as well. I'm so grateful that you're taking the time to sit and chat with us.
My pleasure.
So you have a new book.
I do.
And it is called Sapphire Storm. And I read it and I enjoyed it.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it was every time I thought I knew it was going to happen, I was wrong. And if I was right, I was only right for a very brief time.
Okay, good. That's high praise.
So talk to me a little bit about Sapphire Storm and what we can expect.
Well, you know, the thing that I like about romance series is that they often share a location, or they share a universe, or they share a family or a business, as in the case of Sapphire Cove. But every book in the series stands by itself, typically. And that's definitely the case with this one. Each book has its own relationship, its own love story with two new characters. And maybe the characters have been introduced in a previous book, but in this case, they haven't been. Ethan Blake and Roman Walker are completely new to the series in this book, so you meet them for the first time. In the parlance of romance writing, it's what we call an enemies to lovers age gap romance, which are kind of my favorite kinds, because you've got two characters who, when you first meet them, your first thought is there's no way these guys can end up together. They're just at each other's throats. And on top of that, the age gap kind of plays into that. I mean, a lot of people are hot for people who are younger than them, but the reality of actually getting together with someone who's a lot younger than you is very complicated, particularly when you have nothing in common. They don't know what you're talking about. So exploring what can eventually get those two characters together is the exciting challenge of writing the book, and the answer is always, always, always in their characters. You have to really explore their characters to the fullest extent to find where they're going to connect and where they're going to sync up. And in the case of Ethan and Roman, they've got a shared trauma in their past, but Roman has misinterpreted it. He doesn't know the full story. Roman believes that Ethan destroyed his parents' marriage by having an affair with his closeted father when he was a boy. And he believes this because his mother brought him into Manhattan from their home in Scarsdale to confront his cheating father. And they saw him making out with a man on a street corner in the village. And nobody stuck around to talk about it, and the marriage was over, and Roman was so young, he was shielded from the full story, which is that the man in question was not some boyfriend. It was an escort. And he had no awareness that his client was married. It wasn't his job to know that his client was married. And so years later, he's working as a pastry chef at this exclusive resort in Southern California. Roman recognizes him from a stint guest hosting or guest judging a reality baking show and sets out to destroy him, believing that you destroyed my family. And Ethan just sort of lays this revelation on Roman, and it throws his revenge mission off the rails. It inflames his grief for his mother, who has recently passed away. So then that's just the first two chapters. So it's a book with a lot of drama. It's a book with a lot of drama, but it was interesting to plot the timeline of, because the ignition point is them coming together after just glimpsing each other in different lifetimes. I wrote out a timeline of where they were throughout their entire lives up until that moment. From the moment they were on that street corner together and Roman was a little boy to when they're reunited, I think 17 years later, I knew, even though it's never mentioned in the book, I knew where Roman was living. I knew whatever. And then that's such a valuable toolkit to have as a writer, because when you're in there writing a book and you're like, well, where did they go to college? Oh, there it is. It's on my own.
That is one thing that I did feel, that these characters were fully fleshed out. You know, they fully inhabited the lives that were in the pages. And I appreciate that. And yeah, you gave a quick synopsis, and that really is, you know, just the beginning. There's so much more that happens. And I love that. And again, you know, I always thought I knew what was going to happen, and I was always wrong. I was sitting on the couch next to my fiance while I was reading the book, and at one point I just went, "Oh God!" And she goes, "What?" And I said, "The twist that I was afraid was going to happen just happened." And then 5 minutes later, I was like, "Whew! Now what?" I was wrong.
I know what you're talking about too, and that was deliberate. I was manipulating the reader, which is
you got me. You got me.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I said that. I was like, he did that on purpose, son of a
bitch. I did.
I love it. I love it. So this book is written under the nom de plume of C. Travis Rice. So what are the styles of C. Travis Rice and Christopher Rice? How are they contrasting?
Well, you know, the C. Travis Rice is going to be a romance novel. They're going to end up together, happily ever after. It's going to keep the promises that romance novels make to the reader. There's a difference between a love story and a romance novel. A love story may not end happily. It may be tragic. But a romance novel says, I'm going to give you a hopeful ending. And so if the blues and the pastels on the cover don't clue you into that it's going to be a different experience from most other Christopher Rice novels, hopefully the acknowledged pen name, as I call it, does. Because I think that was really important. The thing I didn't want the pen name to do was to imply that there was any secrecy or shame around writing something this erotic or spicy, as the kids say.
Right.
But also, or the romance genre in general, or the sexuality of the characters. I didn't want there to be any implication that was the problem, but I did want to be clear with readers that you should not go in expecting the same experience you've gotten out of, say, a psychological thriller I've written or a horror novel that I've written.
Right. Yeah, it is a different vibe altogether, but it's definitely, like I said, it was different than I was expecting, because I was expecting, I don't know, something trashier, as it were. And I mean trashier in the best possible way. And you were able to fit the more steamy moments, they didn't come out of nowhere. They didn't,
Mm-hmm.
not have a place. They weren't there just for the sake of being, look, a sex scene,
Right.
you actually feel for the characters by the time they get there, and
Mm-hmm.
hopefully you're rooting for them. I know I was. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and you do
Excellent.
leave us with a sense of hope.
Mm-hmm.
I want these two to win.
That's the highest praise you can get in a book like this. I'm really glad that you felt that way, because it is a fine balancing act between creating messy, complicated characters, but also creating characters that you will root for. And I think Roman can be hard for a lot of people. Roman is sort of like Mason was in the last book, that he's struggling with some demons. And Roman needs to grow up a little bit. And I think you see how the relationship helps him to grow. As I saw one critic say, and I agreed with them, the Roman who appears in that first chapter does not deserve to be with Ethan. He's got to grow from out of being that guy. He's got to let go of those agendas and the manipulation and all that sort of stuff. And he learns how to do that, I think, in the course of the book.
I think they both had some growing to do and some letting
Mm-hmm.
go, in order to accept the other person, accept that you can be loved, that you're worthy
Mm-hmm.
of it, that you're worthy of loving this person and being loved by this
Yeah.
person. And all that was in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it. So, there's the school of thought that you should write what you know. And
Mm-hmm.
there's also the opposing school. Oh God, please don't do that. Who the hell wants that? Is there
Right.
any any of your personal experience in any of your writing?
All of it, in all of my writing. I like to say, I like actors who go back and try to access, incidents from their past that relate to the performance they're trying to give today. Writers, I think, do that with all of their characters in some way. And the thing that hearkening back to what we were talking about earlier with the installments in a romance series being kind of standalones in this way, I didn't have a story idea for book 3 locked in when I started book 1 at the beginning of 2020. So I didn't know what I was going to write about. I had some sense of which characters in this world I want to have a happily ever after. So when my mother died, right before I
Mm,
began writing this book, I was able to incorporate that in. And Roman is really, I gave all of those feelings to a character that didn't have my tools, who was a lot younger than me. So Roman had a really raw and unedited version of grief for his mother.
mm,
And that was therapeutic for me in that respect. But I also think it was fascinating to write about. I have a lot of friends who are sex workers, and as we discover, Ethan is a sex worker.
mm.
And he is dealing with a level of shame. He's not really experiencing the shame. He's dealing with other people's belief that he should feel shame,
That part.
and how those are going to impact, right, how those are going to impact his professional life. He didn't want to be a sex worker into his 40s. He was earning money to send himself to culinary school, and now that he's doing that, he wants to have the life that he built. But there are people who want to take that away from him because of what's in his past. And I think that's a universal struggle that a lot of queer people go through.
Mm.
And so I think that was writing about that was really interesting. But I did have an agenda, which was to normalize sex work. Um,
I caught that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and I have a lot of friends who work in the sex industry. I have a lot of friends who work in adult videos, and they're not the stereotypes that you've been told they are. There are complexities to that industry the way they are every industry. There are complexities to working on Wall Street, especially right
Right.
now. And so I
Right.
very much, the character of Donnie, who is Ethan's friend, who was in book 1,
I
he's
liked
very
him.
much my attempt to sort of shatter those stereotypes.
Yeah, you did get into the mindset of someone who is in the business aspect of that, which I appreciated. And also there was our destigmatizing sex workers and sex work is a relatively new thing in our society. And
Hmm.
that is something that I noticed in this book, that it felt very like new and now and of the moment.
Mm.
There's references to TikTok. There was a Will
Yeah.
Smith reference. I was like, oh, you did
Right.
just write this book.
Literally just wrote it. Yeah.
I love. So is that going to be an ongoing thing with these series of books being so current and in the moment, or is that just a moment of I'm writing this book in this year, so these are the things going to talk about, the characters inhabit the now? Is that where we're going?
I think it's all about the verisimilitude. I love that word of who the characters are, and
Come
I
on,
think
vocabulary.
Roman. I know, right? SAT words. Um, Roman is young, and so he brings a lot of that. There was some research I had to do. I wasn't on TikTok when I started writing this book, and I'm kind of a fair weather TikTok user now. Um, so I had to do a lot of research, and if it's authentic to who they are, and the
Right.
first book is all about Instagram. Logan and Connor Instagram stalk each other,
Hmm.
um, and now the kids are like, "What's Instagram?"
Right,
I'm
right,
like, I can't keep up.
right.
Um, so it's all of that. I love specificity. I sometimes run afoul of editors who are like that. I will like to give a full name to even a peripheral character who's just passing through. If you're meeting that character through the point of view of someone who knows their full name, I like to give them a full name. And everyone's like, "What's all this names?" I'm like, that character has a full name. Like,
Right.
I'm not going to refer to them as the receptionist. If and so a lot of it's about point of view and a lot of it's about authenticity. But I think, you know, ironically, I'm glad that you said that because fundamentally, these books feel very old school. Like they're very old school romance. They've got a lot of atmosphere. The page counts are higher. Um, there's a lot of inclusion of family dynamics and all that sort
Mm.
of stuff. It's like I was inspired by the classic romance novelists like Judith McNaught, and Nora Roberts. I just wanted to do what they were doing with two men.
Right. Yeah. I also got a shade of Sidney Sheldon in
Oh
there.
yeah. Oh yeah. I love The Other Side of Midnight. It's one of my favorite books.
Yes. The only
Yeah.
thing being, once I started to like a male figure in this book, he didn't just die on page 45, which always
Right.
happens in Sidney Sheldon.
Oh yeah. No. Mm-mm.
Yeah, it's like,
Mm-mm. Not
oh,
at
this is
all.
really a good guy. Uh
Yeah.
oh.
Watch your back, good guy.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and I noticed, so Sapphire Cove is, its own world, its own universe, and the characters come and go throughout the books.
Mm-hmm.
And after I read Sapphire Storm, I read the synopses of the other books because, now I'm intrigued. And
Mm-hmm.
I did see names, like folks that play a pivotal moment in this book were the main characters in another book. And
Mm-hmm.
and I appreciate that. Do you see Sapphire Cove moving on into more and more books?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I'm working on Donnie's book next, right now, actually.
Work. Okay. Damn it, you
Mm-hmm.
got me already. Just take my money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Um, well, here's a question for you.
Yes.
In the movie, who's playing Ethan, who's playing Roman? Because,
Ooh,
I was thinking about it.
that's a good one. I think Roman is hard to cast because Roman is Roman is like a composite of a bunch of different fitness models that I screen grabbed shots of,
Right, right,
because to
right.
get the look of him. And um Ethan is the type of actor that we're not seeing enough of right now, which is an older gay man. You know what I mean? Like I think that a lot of what Ethan is struggling with is feeling erased because he's crossed the threshold into his 40s. And
Right,
so we would need to look for an actor who's really who I think fits that stereotype, who isn't trying to always play younger, you know,
right.
so that he can really live and inhabit the age that he actually is what I would want. But, Roman, I think there could be a fun casting call for Roman. I think it would probably be an undiscovered talent. That's the way I'd love to do it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I did appreciate that. The fact that, he wasn't trying to be younger. He was relishing being the age he was.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, you can, be objective about 20-year-olds and how silly they can be.
Yes, indeed. Indeed.
Were there any parts I'm asking you to be objective about your own work. Were there any parts about this book that were your favorite?
I think probably my favorite scene in a book like this is when, you've got two heroes who are at each other's throats and they melt for the first time. They start to
Mm.
soften. That rivalry starts to soften and they start to let down their guard. And that first moment in this book, it's the scene. I don't want to give too much away, but Roman's revenge plan has just gone completely to shit, and then he discovers pretty soon after that his professional situation is completely fucked up, for lack of a better term, and in a way that Ethan predicted when he first met him. Ethan says basically, you may not think you're as bad as I was when I was escorting, but you're working for this one celebrity client, and she's manipulating you, and she's treating you like basically a sex worker, and he calls Ethan to sort of say, yeah, you were right, but it's really a cry for help. And Ethan can hear it. And so he gets stuck out on this hiking trail in the middle of the night. And I won't say why. And Ethan goes to rescue him. And I think moments like that, because the thing that really drives a romance story for me is you're writing about characters who react differently than most of us do in most situations. You're writing about characters who choose self-sacrifice over selfishness. And
Mm.
that's why I think it doesn't work for a lot of readers. Some readers they say that's just too soft and sweet for me. But when you're in that world, that's how it operates. I like to say romance is a genre where characters are rewarded for being vulnerable. For
Yes.
me, for most of what I have written in terms of thrillers, someone was punished badly and unjustly for being vulnerable, and the book is about righting that injustice,
Right.
correcting that injustice.
Mm-hmm.
So, but this is different. This is different. And so that was the moment where the book really, I don't want to say the gooey center started to develop, but it was like, I loved living in those two scenes. There are two scenes back to back. He goes out to rescue him and then he takes him home and cooks for him. And it was just those two characters have gone from hating each other in one moment
Mm-hmm.
to sort of discovering each other in the next. And I loved it. I loved writing them.
And I love those moments of aw,
Yeah.
where and you did sprinkle them in just the right amounts in just the right places. So
Yeah.
no one ever is always anything. There's
Mm-hmm.
always these little cracks and these little moments where you get to see, oh, you're a real person. Oh, you actually do have feelings. Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
That was
Absolutely.
fabulous. Well, I am looking forward to now diving into the other two books in the series,
Oh,
and
good.
you've made a fan out of me, even though I already
Oh,
was.
wonderful. Excellent. I'm so happy. Thank you.
So the book is Sapphire Storm, written by C. Travis Rice, aka Christopher Rice. Sir, thank you so much for taking the time to sit and chit chat with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It was so much fun talking to Christopher Rice, and I'm hoping that he had as much fun as I did with our chat, and I hope you all enjoyed it as well. And, he's got so many more books left in him that there's many more opportunities for him to come back and talk about them too. And I'm looking forward to that opportunity. So before I go, let me not forget our podcast business. If you haven't already, feel free to give us a rating, a review, hit that subscribe button, 5 stars and more, please. Check out our Linktree, linktree.com/fullcirclethepod. You can follow us on all of our socials, at Full Circle Pod on Twitter, at Full Circle The Pod on Instagram, at Full Circle The Podcast on TikTok. You can find Martha at iMarthaMadrigal everywhere. Her writing is IamMarthaMadrigal.wordpress.com. I am at NeverScurred everywhere. You should also consider becoming a patron of the show at patreon.com/fullcirclethepod. For just $3 a month, you get access to all of our episodes ad-free and before everyone else. And starting at the $6 a month tier, you get access to all of our behind-the-scenes and bonus stuff. And it only gets better from there. It's fun over there at the Patreon. And you can also check us out on our Discord channel, Full Circle the Podcast. Podcast business over. So Martha will be back for our next episode, and we'll have more good news, and because the world keeps whirling, we'll have more of the cavalcade of nonsense, and I'm sure there'll be more schadenfreude and pop culture, because what else we got? So until then, I am your host, Charles Tyson Jr., and you have been listening to Full Circle, the podcast. Thank you, everyone. Bye. Full Circle is a Never Scared Productions podcast, hosted by Charles Tyson Jr. and Martha Madrigal, produced and edited by Never Scared, executive produced by Charles Tyson Jr. and Martha Madrigal. Our theme and music is by the Jingleberries. All names, pictures, audio, and video clips are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of their respective copyright holders.